Afternoon, everyone. The time is now 1:02. We are going to go ahead and get started with today's training. Just a reminder, please make sure that your phone or computer is on mute as we go throughout today's training. My name is Nigel Henley, Training and Communications Specialist with the Division of Health and Wellness School Nutrition Programs team. First, I'd like to say thank you to each of you for joining today's training during these really stressful and uncertain times. Before we begin today's training, I want to direct your attention to a few things for today. First, during today's training, we'd like it if you could utilize the chat function, which should be flashing orange now, to make sure that you are submitting your questions to the team as we go throughout today's presentation. We want to make sure that we are doing a great job of answering all questions that come in, and for us to do that, the best way is for you to submit those questions to the chat so that we are capturing all questions. Periodically throughout the training, we'll also be pausing to make sure that we can answer the questions that have come in through chat and just do a double check and make sure that there are no other unanswered questions as we're going throughout the presentation. Additionally, I'd like to point your attention down to the main screen here, which shows the professional standards for today's training. I want you all to be aware that you are receiving 1 hour of training within the professional standards that you see on your screen now for today's training. Before we kick off the training and introductions, I also would like to go through today's agenda with you. And so for today, before we do our welcome, we'll do a welcome, we'll go through today's objectives, we'll talk about what procurement looks like in school nutrition programs. We will go over a suite of solicitation templates and tools. We'll talk about some different procurement formats, and then provide an opportunity for questions and answers and contact information at the end. Again, just want to remind you, as you have questions, please submit them to the chat. With that being said, I will kick off the training and kick it over to Elizabeth Leach to do introductions. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Nigel. And my name is Elizabeth Leach. I'm the School Programs Manager for Nutrition Programs at OSSE. It's great to see a lot of you on the line. Obviously, we are sorry that we're missing you in person, but happy to pivot and transition to a virtual environment here. As you can see, many of our OSSE folks have their video on, so you can see our faces. We've really kind of adopted to this new platform over the past couple of weeks, and we encourage you to do so as well. So if you feel comfortable and want to, please turn on your video, say hi, give a wave, and when we have Q&A, feel free to turn that on as well so you can join us. So over the past few weeks, I don't have to tell you, you're already very well aware, our worlds have really been turned upside down quite a bit. And you all on this call have really prioritized DC students, ensuring that children have access to high quality meals in the safest way possible. From our team here at OSSE, we want to thank you, and we are so proud to be a part of this community along with you. Thank you also for engaging in today's conversation about procuring food and services for next school year, while what happens over the next couple of months is still so unknown to us. We appreciate your hopefulness, your preparedness, and your willingness to push forth. And that said, let's dive right in. So I'd like to introduce, in addition to myself, this past year we had the very, very good fortune of partnering with Sarah Hoverter and Ezra Tannen from the Harrison Institute for Public Law. Sarah and Ezra bring over 10 years worth of legal and procurement related expertise specific to child nutrition programs, and I'll let Sarah and Ezra say hello and introduce themselves a bit further.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Hoverter. I'm a public health lawyer at Georgetown. I know some of you, and I hope everyone is doing really well. We've been really excited to work with OSSE this year to try to put together a suite of templates that, are going to fit the way you all have told us that you want to do your procurement and to achieve the goals that, you all have identified for, hang on just a minute, buddy. Sorry. Okay. To try to achieve the goals that you all have identified for your procurement. And I'm excited to see what we've come up with. So thanks for letting us join in, and looking forward to your questions and commentary. Thanks. Ezra?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ezra. I am a student at Georgetown Law and at the Harrison Institute. And since August, I've been helping OSSE with writing the new solicitation templates and making some of the other documents. And it's really been a pleasure. Everyone on the team is incredible. And later on in this presentation, I'm going to walk through one of the new templates with all of you and explain how to customize these templates to fit your needs.
Hi, everybody. This is Erica Walther. I am the compliance manager here at OSSE, and I'm very excited to talk about procurement with you all today.
Hey, all. This is Beth Hannah, the program specialist at OSSE. For those of you who haven't met yet, I work on farm to school and USDA foods. I'll be chatting about USDA foods specifically today. I agree. I'm excited to be here to see your faces or your names at least, so much so that I actually had a dream about this workshop last night. And I won't get into it other than to say for some reason we were not virtual. We were all at Nigel's house, which the CDC, I do not think they approve of that idea. So this is a much safer and better way for us to be communicating.
Thanks, and I want to acknowledge our other OSSE team members on the line. We have, who you all work very closely with. We have Alex Dobbs, Kimberly Thompson, and Alicia DiCamillo from the school programs team. And we also want to have a special happy birthday shout out to Sam Ullery, our school guardians program specialist. Happy birthday, Sam. Feel free to join me in wishing him happy birthday in the chat if you'd like. Okay, so our main objectives for today's workshop is for you all to feel that you really own the procurement process for your school nutrition programs. We want you to be knowledgeable about how to procure, know how to use the tools and resources we have available for you, and know who to contact when you have questions or would like support. I'll give everyone just a minute to read these little comics that I found. And while you're reading, and once you're done, by a show of hands or comments in the chat, how many of you have ever felt similarly when trying to procure for our child nutrition programs? I see a nod. Thanks, Rob. I know that I have felt very similarly at times. I have maybe sometimes avoided procurement or pushed it back to later because it's so complex and challenging. And hopefully today we'll start to break down some of those challenges together. If I had to give today's workshop a theme, I would call the theme empowerment. You may remember that Sarah and Ezra and our team hosted a number of focus groups in the fall. We heard from you. We heard successes, we heard challenges, we heard even dreams that you had for your school nutrition programs and how the procurement process played a hand in getting there. Based on your feedback, we've developed a new suite of templates and tools which hopefully will empower you to provide meal programs that meet the specific needs of your students and your community. For example, we heard that you want to place more importance on the quality of food you receive when working with food service vendors. To address this, we've included an evaluation scale in the RFP templates that you can alter and customize to align with your organization's values. We also heard that some of you want to be able to purchase local seasonal produce off bid and not be nervous that you're going to get a finding in an administrative review or break a USDA procurement regulation. To meet your needs, we're providing alternate language for some commonly requested scenarios so that you can plug in or change out language depending on your program's needs. Before digging into these severe tools, we're going to pause for a moment. Let's take a look at the chat. Does anyone have any questions so far? I do see one question. Will the slide deck be made available for download? Yes, absolutely. So for those that were registered for this training, the slide deck was sent out in an email last night. We will also make it available after this training as well. I don't see any other questions. So at this time, Erica is going to lead us in a step back into school nutrition programs procurement.
Thanks, Liz. To answer that one last question I did see come through on the chat, the names of all of the presenters as well as our contact information is at the end of the slide deck. So you will have that by the end of the day. Okay, so we are going to review some of the basics and the terminology pertaining to procurement today. Let's talk first about some of the requirements that we have around procurement and for the child nutrition program. So the first thing that we want to remember is that anything you purchase using federal reimbursements, whether you're using federal reimbursements for the entire purchase or you're using federal reimbursements for part of the purchase, must follow federal procurement guidelines. What we are talking about today is the federal procurement guidelines and our templates to help support that process. And so if you have other questions around that, you can always reach out to us as well. These purchases for your child nutrition programs can include anything from food, supplies, materials, equipment, and really anything else that you're using to support the child nutrition program with your federal reimbursement funds. The second really major important piece we want to talk about is that keeping documentation. It's really important that you keep all documentation pertaining to federal procurements for 3 years plus the current year. It is something that we will come and look at during an administrative and a procurement review. And when in doubt, just keep it, don't throw it out. So make yourself a file when you start doing your procurement and just keep all the documentation around that. It can be paper, it can be electronic, either one is fine. Next, let's talk about what some of the formal procurement methods are. And before we dig into this chart here, I do want to just take a step back and talk about the difference between a food service management company and a vendor, because we're going to start using that terminology pretty quickly here. So a food service management company would be any food service company that you are contracting to do your food services for you, and that includes labor, waste management, and really anything beyond just the delivery of meals. There is a fine line there. It can be confusing. So if you know what you want, you know what you're putting your solicitation out for, and you're not sure if it counts as a vendor or a food service management company, just check with us before and we can help you figure that out. A vendor is going to be the organization that is going to deliver just meals and the very, very basic equipment required for those meals. So something like a retherm oven to keep the meals warm or just keep them at temp during delivery, that would be included and okay for a vendor. But anything beyond that would really put you into the food service management category. So there are two types of formal procurement methods. You can do an invitation for bid or you can do a request for proposal. An invitation for bid or an IFB is really focusing on the lowest price. So you're looking more about price and the quality of, you're not addressing quality so much. So if you're just looking for the best price of something you're trying to purchase, whether it's food or equipment, and you know that the product that you're going to get, the standards are maybe pretty standard across the board, and the quality isn't going to vary that much, then an IFB is really the way that you want to go. It's usually a great use for kitchen equipment. Requests for proposals, or RFPs, are there's a little bit more variance in the quality, and so you're really using evaluation as part of your procurement tool here. Your RFPs are going to be awarded to your most responsive and responsible bidder, which is the same as an IFB, responsible and responsive bidder. But you're really going to factor in those evaluation criteria, and we will talk more about that as we dig into the templates. So why is it important to be compliant when you're working on procurement? You want to make sure that we're providing free and open competition. It's very important. That is a big part of federal procurement requirements. You want to make sure that within that free and open competition that all suppliers are on the same playing field, so everybody's got an opportunity to compete. We don't want to create solicitations that have a very limited scope and therefore only like one or maybe two bidders would be able to compete. We want to make sure that our solicitations are open enough that multiple bidders could be bidding at all times. Really, just so you guys are aware, not following procurement requirements and regulations can lead to invalid contracts, delayed and incomplete services, and legal action. I read that because we want to make sure we're clear. We want to make sure we're specific about that. As I said, your contracts during a procurement and administrative review, and if we find that the contracts are not in compliance with federal procurement regulations, corrective action can be to rebid contracts. You might find that you want to do a contract and you want to be able to extend it for multiple years. We want to make sure that that's a solid contract from the start. And then really the root of the competition here is to make sure that we get better prices and better quality of products and services in the district and for your schools. And so ensuring that your bids are going to be competitive and that they're going to be compliant with all of the requirements is going to ensure that we're getting better food and products back to our students. All right, so we're going to look at the process requirements for a couple different procurement methods. We've talked about RFPs and IFBs, and we'll talk about the difference with an FSMC RFP. And then we will also touch a little bit on an informal or small purchase. We are not going to focus on that type of procurement in this training, but we did just want to include it here so folks know. There's a lot of similarities between our formal procurement methods. So the RFPs for an FSMC or an RFP or an IFB for a vendor are all going to be publicly solicited, right? We have to put them out. We have to alert the public that they are available. We always want to get 2 or more responsible bidders to compete. So we want to make sure that our solicitation is broad enough that we can get 2 or more responsible bidders to compete and doesn't narrow the scope too much. And where the differences lie in those top 3 are going to be partially OSSE's involvement. So if you are deciding to use a food service management company, an FSMC, OSSE must review your solicitation before it goes out. And we also just must do a review once your bids are received and you're doing your evaluation before you make an award. We will need to do a review. If you're doing an IFB, a public bid opening is required. So that means that you need to host a publicly announced bid opening where your bidders and others can come, and you will have to read all of your bids, and you don't have to read the full proposal, but you have to give a summary, and you'll have to read the spec sheets that they're providing and pricing aloud to everybody. So that's only required for an IFB, and it is actually only required for DCPS and public charter schools. So if we have any private schools on the line, a public bid opening is not required for private schools. With the informal and small purchase, you can use informal or small purchase method for securing a vended contract. You cannot do it for an FSMC. It must be under the small purchase threshold, which federally is $250,000, but some DCPS has a lower threshold, and your specific organization may or may not have a lower threshold, so you should check with that as well. With that, you need to get two quotes from qualified prospective bidders. You should write out some specifications, and you should document everything. We have some tools on our Google Drive on the resource page. We'll go through that as well. But you do not need to do a formal procurement for the small purchase method. If you are a smaller school where you feel like you're going to be spending a less amount of money, that you could do the informal or small purchase, but you're not sure it's the right route, feel free to reach out to us and we can kind of talk that through with you. So a couple updates from previous years for those who are on the line that have done procurement with us for a long time. As I mentioned, the solicitation document review only applies to food service management company solicitations. In the past, we've looked at everybody's contracts. We're not going to do that anymore. Our requirement now is that if you are doing a food service management solicitation, you will send that to us twice. So you'll send it to us before you go out on the street, before you put your bids out. And then once you have all your bids and you have gone through your evaluation criteria and you have made a determination before you make an award, you'll send us your evaluation sheets and who you are going to be selecting, and we'll review that and approve it before that goes out. If you are doing a contract not with an FSMC and you do need support, we are still here to help. We are happy to review contracts as much as we can and provide as much technical assistance as you need. The requirement is only for an FSMC. The second updated process is going to be bid openings. So if you're doing an IFB, you are required to do a public bid opening for DCPS and public charter schools. The SFA is responsible for hosting and running the public bid opening. In the past, OSSE has played a pretty large role in hosting those bid openings, and we will no longer be doing that. We're happy to attend if you would like us to be there, but we are only as an observer. We are not allowed to participate and be an active member of planning or running the bid opening, and there is no requirement for us to be there. But again, if you need some support, please let us know, and we're happy to help as much as we can. Before I hand the next portion of our training over to Liz, I'd like to address some of the questions that came through.
Sure. Hello, this is Kimberly Thompson, one of the new program specialists. I may have exchanged emails with several of y'all, but if I'm in person. So I'm going to start by reading the submitted questions. The first one is from Cesar Chavez. We started a new contract with DC Central Kitchen this year in school year 1920. What forms do we need for this upcoming school year?
Great question. So it depends on your contract here. You'll need to look in your contract language and see if you have the opportunity to do option use, if you would like to continue with that contract. And if you are continuing the contract and there are any modifications you'd like to do, you can look into doing contract modifications to make changes. We will have some resources available for that. You are, as we talk about our new templates, you'll hear you're not required to use the new templates. So if you have a current contract in place, you want to stick with it, you're welcome to do that.
Okay, our next question. If an SFA is unsure whether they want to pursue a food service management contract or a contract, can the RFP include requests for both?
Good question. No, so your specifications need to be specific to the services that you're looking for. The services that you're looking for are going to dictate whether you are looking for an FSMC or a vendor. So really, if you're just looking for meals to be delivered, that's going to be a vendor. If you're looking for anything beyond that, so if you're looking for a staff person to hand out the meals and to the point of service, if you're looking for a staff person to do any sort of preparation of the meals, if you're looking for waste management, or anything beyond that, it's going to really speak to an FSMC contract. If you're not sure what is the right fit for your school, then I would suggest scheduling a time to talk with your program specialist about what you're currently doing, what you're looking to do, and they can help you determine whether an FSMC or a vendor is more appropriate.
We have the RFP template
prepared, or are LEAs left to do or create the template on their own?
Good question. We do have a template. We have many templates. They are wonderful. And we're going to spend a significant portion of this training digging into them. And we will guide you guys through how to download a copy of that while we're on the training.
And the next question comes from Matt Whitnall. Can you clarify your question about submission to the public school charter board?
I know what you're talking about, Matt. This is separate. So you do still need to follow all public charter school board requirements in terms of what you need to submit to them and what they require you to do. This is a separate requirement from PCSB.
Okay. The next question, and if an SFA wants to end a current contract, when should they notify their vendor if the contract ends this summer at the end of this school year?
Yep. You should look in your contract and determine if there is a termination window. If it says you need to give them a certain number of days, if you're not going to renew. I think that if you're looking about it not as what's going on this year, but you know you're not going to renew the contract next year, then you just need to look. Well, I'm not quite sure what kind of contract you have. If it is, it probably is not a multi-year contract, and you would just need to notify them that you're not going to take advantage of an option year. It sounds like that would be correct, but again, you can reach out to your program specialist and they can review your specific contract and give you one-on-one guidance there.
All right, our next question deals with current SFAs that are adding a new site. How does this impact their current contract?
We're going to talk about that when we go over the templates, and we have some additional guidance on that.
And our last question asks, who is the program specialist for all of the SFAs?
So you should know who your OSSE program specialist is. If it was Barbara, you should have received an email letting you know whether you've been transitioned to Alex or Kimberly. But if you're unsure, you can put your school name in the chat and we'll chat you back who your program specialist is.
And this is Liz, I'll jump into that. The question was actually from a new LEA that's starting for next year. And so for new LEAs, you should be receiving an email within the next week or two from Nigel introducing you to our team, as well as from your program specialist, so you'll know directly who to reach out to. Wonderful. I'm going to continue on. I know that there may still be some questions. We will have a broader, longer section at the end for questions, so don't worry, keep them coming. Okay, so now I am excited to introduce you to our new suite of solicitation templates and tools. As you can see on, let's see, the left-hand side, here we go. The left-hand side, you will see 7 solicitation templates that we have for your use. As Erica said before, these are not required by any means. These are just templates that, with the help of Sarah and Ezra, our team has put together for your use. You can feel rest assured that these meet all federal and local requirements. So they meet USDA regulations, they meet DC Health Fee Schools Act regulations. They also have best practices recommended from OSSE. And we encourage you to use them to make it a little bit easier for you to go out for bid. They are, however, not required. You do not have to use them. There are links to all 7 templates on our Google Drive. When you link directly to the Google Drive, you will see a version that cannot be edited. That is so that the template stays there for your use. In order to use it, you will want to download it, save it to your computer, your shared drive, whatever you use, in order to move forward and make alterations from there. We will go into next steps on exactly how to use those templates and how to alter them to meet your needs. As you can see, we have an RFP for food service management companies. We have both an RFP and an IFB for vended meals, and we have both RFPs and IFBs for food items and non-food items. Those last 4 templates would mostly be used if you're operating as a self-practice. On the right-hand side, you see a number of additional tools many that complement the solicitation templates on the left. So the first is a short 2-page how-to. It's an instructional use for how to use each of these templates. So I highly recommend clicking through and reading through that. Again, it's only 2 pages, so it is hopefully a pretty quick, easy tool to utilize. The next 3 templates are associated documents with each of the RFPs that you see on the left. So they include a responsive bidder checklist, so you can make sure that each bid you receive is all-encompassing and responsive. It also includes a template evaluation scoring sheet, which you can modify to meet your needs, as well as bidder references. Almost second to last on there, you'll see pricing sheets to use for the food and non-food RFPs and IFPs. And lastly, you'll see a procurement timeline and checklist that we're going to talk through a little bit further as we get further along in this workshop. So now let's dive into one of the templates. What I'll ask everyone to do is click on this link, and I know you can't click on it, so we'll have one of our team members post this link in the chat now for you to click on. This link was sent out in the email I sent last night, so it could be found there in the body of the email, as well as in the PowerPoint that was sent along to go with this presentation. So I'll give everyone a moment to click through to that link. Make sure we get that for you. All right, there's the link. So can everyone take a moment to open the folder? What this is going to take you to is our folder of solicitation templates. And the one we're going to walk you through is called OSSE NSLP Vended Meals RFP. So we've chosen to walk through this one as we think it's one that many folks may use. If you want to walk through this one with us, open the Vended Meals RFP. If you think you might be using a different template, feel free to open whichever one speaks to you. If you're going to be using a food RFP or a non-food IFP, feel free to open whichever one you may be interested in, download it, and follow along as we guide you through how to use each of these templates. Okay, are there any questions, or is anyone having trouble opening that link before we move further? We miss Barbara too, guys. Thanks for the note. We'll send her your love when we speak to her. All right, well, hopefully everyone's had a moment to open those templates, and Ezra is going to help us walk through them.
All right, thank you, Liz. Hi, everyone. This is Ezra. And as mentioned, OSSE is really empowering SFAs to customize all these solicitation templates that we have on the Google Drive to meet SFA needs. And to help you with customization, the templates use a color coding system that allows SFAs to easily identify which sections are legally required and which sections SFAs can or should change. So I'm going to walk through the Vended Meals RFP to show you how the color coding system makes customization easier for all of you. And if you're looking through another template, you could, it should be easy to follow along in those as well, because the section numbers usually line up. And Liz will, as we walk through this, Liz will jump in if there's anything that she would like to add. Okay, so first, we are going to look at an example of blue text, as you see on the screen. Blue text signifies text that SFAs must replace before sending out the solicitation. And blue text kind of shows up all over the templates, and it's usually a placeholder for putting in dates and the SFA's name. But for a more complex example, let's turn to section C1, which is on page 26 for those following along with the Vended Meals RFP. And you'll see the blue underlined text, which is under the value statement heading, which we also have on the screen. And in this example, SFAs will replace the blue text with their own value statement that notifies bidders of their educational, nutritional, sustainability, and other goals that the SFA wishes to accomplish through the meal program. For example, you might want to say that a goal of your SFA's meal service is to expose students to fresh vegetables. So you'd write that, you'd replace the blue text with something to that effect. And in the space provided, bidders will respond by giving a short write-up of their commitment to these goals. They might demonstrate their commitment to serving fresh vegetables, for example. And SFAs could use these responses to evaluate which bidders best deserve a contract. All right. Next, we're going to look at an example of text highlighted in red. Red highlights signify parts of the solicitation that are required by law, and SFAs should not change the red highlighted requirements. For example, you could turn to section B3, which is on page 10 of the Vended Meals RFP. And this section, B3, sets the minimum standards for the food specifications. It just sets the minimum standards for all the food that is served at the meal service. And you'll see the red highlights in item 2, which is also up on the screen. This provision requires all milk served to be fat-free or low-fat, which is required by the federal regulations. And it also requires milk to be unflavored as required by the Healthy Schools Act. So these are provisions that you cannot change because they are required by law. Next, we'll look at yellow highlights. And if text is highlighted in yellow, then you could change the text within reason, which is an important condition. But you must include something on the topic. So, for example, we could turn to section L2, which is the technical rating scale. And on page 51, for those following in the Vended Meals RFP, the technical rating scale lets bidders know which criteria the SFA will use to judge them and decide which bidders are best for the job. And we highlighted this text in yellow because all SFAs are required to clearly set out all the criteria used to judge the various bidders. But so there must be something on this topic. There must be evaluation criteria, but every SFA could come up with their own reasonable criteria to use and could also decide how much weight to assign to each criteria. So, for example, if you look at the default text that we have in the RFP and also up on the screen, you'll see that the templates will let bidders know that there are up to 40 points out of 100 available for to judge how good their prices are. And SFAs could change this criteria within reason, which would usually mean reserving the most points to award on pricing. Also, the default language here awards up to 5 points for the variety of nutritious meals in the sample menu. That is in the first bullet point under method of approach and implementation. And again, you could change this requirement within reason, by changing the number of points awarded or finding some other way to judge how the bidder is committed to nutrition, or you could even take that criteria out altogether. All right, we'll move on to green highlights. So if text is highlighted in green, then SFAs could choose to keep it as is or use alternate language that we've provided in an appendix at the end of the solicitation. So, for example, if you turn to section H1, which is the method titled the method of award, and is on page 49 of the vended meals RFP and also on the screen, you will see that this provision informs bidders that the SFA will award only one of them with a contract to provide all the meals for the meal service. However, some SFAs might want the choice to split their meal service between multiple contractors and award contracts to a few bidders. So in that case, before sending out the solicitation, you could replace this green provision with alternate text that we will turn to now. So you could turn to way at the end of the template to the section titled Options for SFAs to Choose. That's on page 77 of the Vended Meals RFP. And look for the underlined words H1 option, which is also up on the screen. And you'll notice that if you use this alternate provision, then it gives the SFA the choice to either award a contract to one bidder or to multiple bidders. And if you want that choice, you could copy and paste this optional language into section H1 on page 49. All right, and lastly, there's a lot of provisions that are not highlighted. And when there is no color coding, then there are no requirements on the text, and SFAs can leave the default text, change it, or even remove it when removal makes sense. So as just one example, we could turn to section B7, which is the format of bids. That's on page 19 and on the screen. And this tells bidders how to structure the bids they submit. It says if you're looking at it, it says that all submitted proposals must include 4 sections. The first one is titled Executive Summary. And because this text is not highlighted, you could change this requirement and ask for bids with 3 or 5 sections, or change the titles, and you could remove these requirements. You can remove requirements that bidders divide their proposals into headings, if that makes sense for your SFA. Okay, I know that is a lot of information. Just to summarize the color coding, blue means replace it, red means leave it alone, means change but don't delete, and no highlights means do as you please. And I will pause for questions now before handing this back off to Erica.
I thought I unmuted myself, guys.
Okay. So the first, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the timeline and USDA foods here. You can look on the left-hand side of our timeline and it's indicating the month, and then the right-hand side of the timeline is going to indicate the responsibility on the school food authority. Before we dig into kind of the details of each month, I want to acknowledge the months and that we have on here and kind of the earliness of the timeline. While we aren't following it this year, obviously, as we're starting in November, what we are recommending is that moving forward, folks begin thinking about procurement way earlier in the school year. We're asking that for a couple reasons. So one, we want to make sure that everybody is thinking about procurement way before they are running into kind of end of year closeout things, so that everyone has a contract in place and folks are not scrambling towards the end of the school year or over the summer to get a contract in place. And we also want to be really conscious about the USDA foods timeline and aligning procurement and USDA foods. And Beth is going to talk about that a little more in depth after I review our timeline and checklist here. So all of these are recommendations. Again, OSSE is not going to hold you accountable or require that you start exactly in November and you finish up exactly in May or June. You'll need to really customize this to your own needs, and we know that. This is our recommendation for starting early. The timeline may be shorter for some schools, it may be longer for some schools. Each section may take a little bit longer depending on the type of procurement that you're doing. So really, this is a place to guide you. And feel free to download this and customize it on your own. So starting around November, we want you to start thinking about your food service contract needs. Are you happy with the current vendor that you have? Do you want to extend the contract that you have? Do you want to go out for a bid again? Are you looking to do something different? We want you to start having those conversations internally. And then also, if needed, reaching out to your program specialist and talking about it with them if you feel like you need some guidance or advice about what's going on. Another thing that they can do is connect you with another SFA in the district that maybe is going through a similar thing or went through a similar thing last year and you need some thoughts and you want to see something in real time. You can go, we can make those connections for you. In December, we want you to start working on your documents. So determine whether you're going to do an IFB, an RFP, or you're going to do informal procurement. Are you not going to go out for bid, but instead you want to do an extension? And with that, do you want to do any modifications to your contract? It's definitely important if you determine that you want to extend but do modifications to think about something called material change and determining whether the modifications you want to do are allowable within your current contract or whether making those changes will require that you go out for bid. We will have some documents available on the Google Drive to support in kind of decision tree, looking at what the requirements are around material change. But again, if you're unsure, you can always reach out and talk that through with your program specialist. If you are interested in doing procurement documents, you're going to go out for a procurement, you're updating some documents, you're welcome to submit those to review to our office as early as December. We're happy to start looking at them for you and attend an OSSE training. So our hope is to have this training every year in December so that we are really kickstarting the procurement process early in the year and making sure that everybody goes into this procurement season with all the knowledge that we have and we can provide. In January, what we recommend is that if you are doing an FSMC solicitation, that you submit that documentation to OSSE for review and approval so that you can get it out on the street and start your procurement bid process. If you're doing IFBs and RFPs, you will need to publicly post, so you'll make sure that that happens in January too. February to April is our biggest chunk. That's going to really depend on when you get your solicitation out on the street, how long you leave it open for, how many proposals you get. So for IFBs, you're going to have to host your public bid opening and review your proposals and make an award. The RFPs, you're going to have to do, your evaluation panel is going to review your proposals and make an award. And if you're an FSMC, you do have to leave time to submit your selected proposal to OSSE for review before making that award and announcing it. So it's really important for FSMC folks to remember to build in the review timeline. There's 2 review timelines there, right? You have to initially submit documentation to us and then also submit your proposed award to us. And so building that into the timeline that you either put in your solicitation so folks are aware, but also internally for planning. May and June is when you're going to kind of close out the procurement process and move forward. And we want to do a strict reminder that you want to keep all documentation associated with your procurement. So if you're unsure, just keep it. If you've got informal notes, you can put them away in the folder. You can scan them in if you're going to keep everything electronically. And just make sure before you move on to your next project, you're really kind of closing out that procurement process to make sure that you're keeping all the documentation that's there. So before we move on to the USDA food section, I want to just see if there are any questions that came up on the timeline.
Sure. We had a last minute question submitted. I think it references Ezra's presentation. There's a question about the rating system under section H1.
I just had a specific question, and I was wondering if I should defer it to whoever our program specialist will be. I didn't want to hold up the whole call for my specific question. But is that the best process to ask Nigel? Or?
Just wait till the larger Q&A towards the end, because I imagine others will have similar questions that you do, Kiana.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
The next question asks about special requirements for the public charter school board. Can you provide insight into the requirements and whether they're separate requirements?
Yep. So again, the requirements for the public charter school board are different. We do have a little bit of information about that, but you really want to check with your point of contact at the public charter school board in terms of what they need to see from you in terms of your procurements. I know in some instances there are requirements that are waived for your food contracts for school, but you'll have to reach out to PCSB for that specifically.
I guess as the one who was asking that question, I was trying to understand if there are specific National School Lunch Program requirements for PCSB beyond the typical PCSB requirements for $25,000 contracts.
Not that we're aware of, and if any other charter school wants to chime in and help answer that question, you're more than welcome to. We're not aware of any other specific, school nutrition program requirements. We're speaking mostly, I think the talking points we're talking about are just basic procurement requirements.
And can OSSE send the proposed timeline separately to LEAs?
Well, so the whole slide deck is going to be was sent to you that you can pull it out from, and we will also have it available as a separate document on the Google Drive in the procurement resources folder.
Some other questions that deal with the public charter school board about, is there a manual with the information in it in regards to procurement?
Yeah, so for the public charter school board, you'll have to look at their handbook and their website and your point of contact there. And again, I do think that there are some folks on the call who are very new to the public charter school board and some folks on the call who have been working with the public charter school board for a long time, and it might be great to kind of touch base with each other. And if anyone on the call is willing to be like a mentor, we're happy to make those connections for you. But in terms of an OSSE manual for federal procurement guidelines, we do have some procurement trainings and slides from our previous NSLP trainings that we do every year. They're all on the Google Drive, so you can move through the procurement folder there and our annual training slides and look at all of those. And then we can also direct you to other resources if there's nothing in there that is helpful. Those should cover most of the content that we're covering here. And again, you can always reach out to your program specialist with questions. Okay, I'm going to send it over to Beth to talk about USDA foods.
Great, thank you, Erica. Good questions, everyone. And we have now made it to the final slide of our presentation, final content slide before our Q&A. And in my not humble opinion, we've saved the best for last. So hopefully you all remember our friend PAL from previous trainings. For those of you who have not yet had the pleasure, PAL stands for Planned Assistance Level. And this is the funding that you can use for USDA foods. And because PAL is money, PAL is definitely our friend. I know there's a few new folks on the line, so I just want to do a real quick overview of how we can spend these funds. And there's 3 ways to spend your PAL. You can spend it on USDA foods that are delivered directly to your SFA or to your distributor. So in our example here, that would be cases of frozen chicken. Another way you can spend your PAL is bulk for further processing USDA food items. So this would be if you purchase flour during the ordering period and you send it to a processor to make it into pizza dough or bread products, or in our example here, some delicious breakfast waffles. The third way of spending USDA foods is DoD Fresh, which is ordering weekly fresh fruits and vegetables through the Department of Defense Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, not to be confused with FFVP, which is also called the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. So to make things easier, we call this one DoD Fresh. So regardless of how you are using your PAL, we know, like all procurement, we need to do things properly. So I wanted to spend just a little bit of time to talk about how planning for your procurement along the time Erica covered can help you get the USDA foods that you want and get them from the people you want and get them when you want them. So it really is helpful to be thinking earlier in the year than perhaps you're used to. And there may even be some SFAs on the phone today who can speak to the benefit of thinking through these things earlier. So I'm going to give just a couple of examples for each of the 3 ways you can spend PAL and how that overlaps with timing. So for the first 2, direct delivery and bulk for further processing, those orders actually go into USDA in April. So that's now. And so if we have a better understanding of who you're going to be working with, if you're working with a vendor or an FFMC, which products you're interested in, then we can ensure that that language is within those contracts and that you are getting your needs met. So that works for both direct delivery and bulk for further processing. The language that you find in the templates that we are looking at today is already in there. The USDA foods language is in there. You'll just want to pick the scenario that works best for you. You'll also see a place to put in your planned assistance level. So now you'll know what numbers you're adding there. I want to point out just a couple of things about bulk for further processing. So like all of our other procurement processes, we need to be sure that we are doing proper procurement for our processors. So if you're working with a distributor who is going to receive your Tyson chicken or Jennie-O turkey or whatever other processor, you are working with that should be included in your bid language. And finally, even if you are using DoD Fresh, which does not have an April ordering period, that doesn't happen until later in the year, still planning ahead, having our procurement checklist and timeline following close to what we recommend will make sure that your sites are set up to receive DoD Fresh. If you're working with a vendor or a food service management company, that they know that you are working with them so that they can get your name, your sites into favors, and hopefully then those deliveries are coming as soon into the school year as possible. So in short, timely procurement helps you order the USDA foods you want from the people you want it from so you can use it when you want. And that sounds like a pretty great deal to me. I think we're going to open it up now to general questions. So maybe if there are USDA foods questions, we'll just hold it to the question and answer period since we're so close. But it looks like Liz has a transition before we do so.
Thanks, Beth. Yes, before we transition to more questions, which I know folks have and I'm eager to hear about, I just wanted to acknowledge that we just dove into a lot of details about preparing formal bids. We provided you multiple templates and tools and checklists and timelines. And we didn't do this in order to overwhelm you, and I can see where it may be overwhelming. We're really hoping that the likelihood is that you will identify that you might want to use one of these templates, maybe two. You'll identify which one meets your needs, and you'll be able to tailor it towards what your school nutrition program and your students and your community are looking for. So hopefully these templates are giving you the autonomy and the flexibility to do that. And hopefully making it easier for you than creating something on your own. Today, again, is all about empowerment, empowering you to run the school nutrition program that you want. And as you prepare to start using one of these templates or moving forward, please know that we're here to support you. You can reach out to your program specialist or anyone on our team with specific content expertise to help you tweak and modify those templates to what you want them to be. At the end of this presentation, there is a list of all of our names, phone numbers, and email addresses. And I also am hearing and seeing a lot of questions from new LEAs that are coming on board that have never done this before. And don't worry, we're not going to leave you hanging. We do have a special, hopefully NSLP 101 session that we're looking forward to having with you over the next month, where we can dive in deeper to some of these and help you help provide technical assistance as you go through this process. So, and I didn't even tell you about this lovely lady here. Does anyone know who this is? Feel free to chat it or unmute yourself. Me. It is you, Lola. It is. This is our school lunch heroes, which now more than ever, our school food service workers are heroes. And so we want you to think of yourself as a school food service hero and being empowered to do this work. So why don't we open it back up for questions, and we'll go through the questions that come in through the chat.
The first question is directed for Beth. Can you highlight some of the cool new optional language created to promote the Farm to School program?
Thanks for the pitch, Lola. Yes, so while I may be wearing my USDA hat, USDA Foods hat right now, I will proudly take it off to talk about Farm to School. The templates have some great option language for Farm to School. And it's a good example of how it can cross over some of the highlighting. So when Ezra was talking about those different color options, so there are some pieces of Farm to School that are in the Healthy Schools Act. And so those things are required, and you'll see that throughout. You'll see, if I remember my numbers correctly, since I've been looking at these contracts a lot lately, I believe it's C8 is where you'll find Farm to School. And you'll see there's a red portion that talks about the local tracking log, and that local foods should be served to the extent possible. And that's great. That is something we should be really proud of here in DC, that is language that is required to be in your bids. There's also then examples of yellow language and green language with Farm to School. So if you are still in the vended RFP contract that we were looking at with Ezra, if you scroll down to the bottom in the portion that he was talking about optional green language, you will see there is probably almost 2 pages worth of Farm to School related activities and programs that you can choose to put into your contract. So I can't choose my favorite logo because that's like choosing a favorite child. They're all so exciting and so important. This is probably my favorite change to the template for my programming, that this language is there for your use. And I would love to hear if there are, as you are using the contract, if you put in other things, and I'm sure that is true for the team as a whole. If there is language that you think would be great for other SFAs, that would fit sort of into that green category of optional language, we'd love to know that so we can share that with others as well.
We received another question related to PAL for Beth. For schools that are not providing meals during the current shutdown and are having their PAL reallocated to other schools who are, how will this impact our funding level next year?
Good question, and great use of terminology. Yeah, so their planned assistance level, and happy to answer questions offline too. This is something that I've been hearing about from many SFAs, and we recognize that this isn't something that is only touching us here in DC, that this is a national situation. So your planned assistance level, without getting too far into the weeds here, which is a dangerous proposition when it comes to USDA foods, I sometimes slip into that rabbit hole pretty quickly. Your planned assistance level is estimated in January. So as you all hopefully have seen, and actually let me give the caveat that this is for schools who have been in the program, have been in NSLP for a full year. So for those of you who are just joining, you'll get to join this Happy USDA Foods bus next year. So you received a notification of your estimate of planned assistance level in January. And this is based on the number of meals served you served the prior year, based on a meal rate that we get from USDA. This amount is what you should be operating under. This is what we're planning for that will be used for USDA foods that were ordered in April that you'll use for DoD Fresh. For the recognizing that meals look different right now, we know that there's going to be an overall entitlement impact for DC, where we're serving fewer meals with NSLP, and so that's going to impact our entitlement down the line. We know USDA knows that, and so it is what it is at this point. That won't impact this coming school year because those meals were based on the prior year. So if we need to deal with changes in entitlement, that will come in 2 school years. So fortunately, we're still operating off of last year's amounts. And so your entitlement that you received in January should be what you're working on at this point. I think the other question that was in there is about reallocation. So yes, so funds that are not being used right now for whether it's due to school closings or for whatever reason. Those we can make available to schools who are serving meals at this point. So we do some shifting amongst SFAs, and that won't happen without you knowing about it. So no worries there. But we move things around to use as much of our USDA funds as a state, as DC, as we can. So the individual changes to your entitlement, to DC's entitlement won't impact you at an individual SFA. If you are not using all of your funds this year, that gets moved over. We're dealing with it as a larger state, and then you'll still have your planned amount going forward. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm not sure if I was totally clear, but the general idea is we deal with any changes as a larger entity. Your individual SFA won't have any ramifications or changes due to a change in meal served this year.
Our next, will the NSLP 101 training be shared with everyone?
Great question. Currently, we're working on setting up a specific session for the 5 new LEAs that are coming on board next year. But after that, we hope to run the NSLP 101 training quarterly for any and all new staff who are new to working on our programs, or for folks who just want a refresher. So when that's available, we will share that as well.
A few more procurement questions. How will the sampling requirement work if schools are not reopened?
That's a great question, and thanks for posing that. I don't know that we have an answer to that as of now. I would encourage folks to think through that creatively, as sampling could be done with adults but not students, or in some creative fashion, or at a later date. That's a great question. I don't think we have a solution as of yet.
If an SFA does not want to rate a vendor solely on price, is that possible?
Absolutely, it's possible. So for those looking to go out for a bid and use price, award based on price, you would use an IFB. If you want to include other rating factors and evaluation items, you're going to use an RFP.
I believe the next question is a follow-up to the prior question. Is that considered the alternate language provided in the appendix in the RFP template?
I'm going to try to answer the question, but Kiana, let me know if I'm not understanding the question correctly. So at the very end of every single template, there's a couple pages of alternate language. These are providing alternate verbiage for you to use for the green highlighting throughout the solicitation. So the example Ezra walked us through was, I believe in section H1, it awards the solicitation to one vendor. Alternate language could be provided to say that you're awarding the solicitation to one or multiple vendors. So that's what the last multiple pages in each of the solicitation templates is alternate language to use.
Just to clarify, the alternate language, so in other words, in order to, it says something, the original text that was in there, I think in H1 said something about, the rating, they're rated based off of price, but then when you go to the alternate language, it says multiple vendors plus looking at other factors. But what if I don't want multiple vendors, but I just want to say we're looking at multiple factors and not just price? Is that possible? Is there...
Yeah, so if you're looking at multiple factors, not just price, we'll first want to make sure that you're using an RFP, which you're already looking in the RFP section. And I believe that section L2 is the evaluation rating scale. The evaluation rating scale is up to 100 points. And that is all highlighted in yellow. So we have laid out what we recommend as an evaluation rating scale, but you can change those items within that as long as price is still the largest factor. So you can decide which item on the evaluation scale you want to give more weight or more points, if you'd like to weight it differently depending on, you know, where you want your program to go.
There's another question on the rating tool. How do you determine how many points to award a vendor based on the rubric? For example, if we use what's listed and 40 points goes towards the vendor's price, how do you determine if a vendor gets the full 40 points or 5 points or 25 points as it relates to their price?
That's a great question as well. And I don't know that I have an exact answer for you, but that hopefully we'll have more guidance to come so that we can help you decide that even further. And again, for right now, these are templates and tools for you to use and you to alter as you see fit. So you can decide what indicates 20 out of 40 points, what indicates 25 out of 40 points, what indicates 35 out of 40 points. You can determine that prior to going out for bid to know how you're going to award points once you get the bids in.
The next question deals with the PAL. Is the SFA responsible for ordering food or is the vendor responsible?
Good question. So an SFA is responsible for using their PAL. We have SFAs that work with vendors, we have SFAs that work with food service management companies, and we have vendors that work with who are self-prep and are doing their own work. Even within that situation, we have vendors and FSMCs that are choosing to use different combinations of the three ways of spending or those funds. So you'll work with whoever wins your award to determine how your PAL is spent.
How do we include future growth of our examples include increases in enrollment, adding new sites, when we develop our IFP or RFP?
Thank you for asking that question. That's a great one. And I'll start off by answering, but hopefully Sarah might be able to chime in as well and help me answer. So this was a common ask from many school food authorities to say, you know, we know what we need for next year, but in the coming years, we're going to have an added grade or we may open another site. How do we incorporate that into our solicitation so that it's included in future years of our contract without having to re-go out for bid? So I do believe some of the language and the alternate language on the bottom couple of pages of each template provides templated alternatives for that. And Sarah, do you mind chiming in to help us walk through that, or we can also follow up offline specifically for that answer?
Yeah, no problem. So we definitely heard this during the sessions we had in the fall to figure out what SFAs felt like was not in the old templates and something that they were anticipating using. So the answer is that we've got language in the alternates at the end that you can use. Basically puts the potential bidders on notice that you know next year you're going to be adding X number of sites, or we know next year we're going to have X number more students or X percentage more students, or sort of whatever you do know, so that for a couple of reasons. One, you want to make sure that any vendor or food service management company or supplier that you end up with can do that total quantity, right? You don't want to hire somebody who's like stretching to get to where you are now and won't be able to do everything next year. And two, just from that USDA full and open competition, everybody having all the information piece, you want to make sure that everybody who's bidding on it has an opportunity to bid on what you know. So we've got language in that alternate language at the end that will allow you to stick a section in that just says, we've given you all of our numbers for this year. This is what we think next year is going to look like. Does that help?
This question goes back to the NSLP 101 training. For the training, can SFAs invite all representatives from other organizations to play a role in the program?
Can I ask for clarification? What type of other organizations?
So to clarify the question, it was actually more of a suggestion that if OSSE is hosting a training, that they also includes a representative from DC, PCSB, and any other organization that will assist schools in navigating the complexity of this procurement process would be much appreciated.
Sure, great suggestion. And yeah, I don't see why you can't extend an invite to PCSB. We do work with EdOps, so I know for many of you who contract with EdOps, we try to stay in touch with them so they kind of are aware of what we're doing and vice versa, so that they can support those of you who work with them as well.
Right, the next question deals with the distinctions between the produce, grocery, and dairy contracts and how strict these categories are. For example, there are a number of companies that mainly produce, or that are producer companies, but also offer items like eggs and cheese that we'd like to complete an invitation for bid for their contract. We would also be able to include produce. Can SFAs decide what items go into each bid? How much flexibility is there between these categories?
Sarah, I see you nodding. If you want to tackle this, I'll go right ahead.
Sure. So we went back and forth with this amongst ourselves a lot, honestly. How many like individual contracts versus like an umbrella one that you could customize yourselves? We finally decided that it was easier to have an umbrella one for, if we're talking about self-prep, an umbrella one for all the food, and you can just take stuff out that you don't want. If you just want to bid produce, take all the other stuff out that doesn't deal with produce. If you just want to bid dairy, similarly, if you want to do produce and eggs and cheese, it's totally flexible. I think we wanted to give you sort of everything all in one place, and then you just take out what you don't want, rather than having to like cobble together a whole bunch of different ones and figure out what goes where. Does that make sense? Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah.
It looks like we've come to the end of our questions in the chat, but we will give another minute. I see some more rolling in. Feel free to keep putting them in there, and we'll queue them up for another little bit. Won't keep people too long, but to keep the opportunity open.
If an SFA pursues a food service management company RFP, will OSSE need to review the process at 2 points in the timeline? Have an idea of how long it will take for OSSE to conduct these reviews?
Great question. Thanks for asking. I think it depends on how closely you're using our template or how many changes you make to it. So the templates have been vetted through USDA. We know as they stand that they're allowable. If you were to stick pretty closely to that template, I would say it would be a rather short turnaround time. If you were to modify greatly and extend a lot of different variations, get really creative and flexible, we encourage you to do so. But I would encourage you to flag for your program specialist ahead of time what you plan on doing and when you anticipate having the bid ready for our review, so we can block time on our calendars to review that. That would be a more extensive review. So I don't have any specific turnaround times, apologies. We'll work towards that in the future. Because this is a new process for us, we're learning as we go, as you are. So I imagine this year, as we go through the processes, folks, we'll understand what that turnaround time looks at and have more accurate estimates moving forward. All right, well, while we're waiting to see if there are more questions that roll in, I'll give an overview of just the resources that we have. The top link that you see here will take you to all of our procurement training documents. So as Erica referenced earlier, we have this training, which the slide deck will be available, as well as prior trainings we've done on general procurement in the child nutrition programs. You can find slide decks there. Then there's a link to these procurement templates. So all the templates and associated documents are there for you. And if anyone wants to dive even further into federal procurement regulations, you're more than welcome to. There's a link there. That's something we receive from USDA every quarter. The last time it was updated was in October of 2019, and we will refresh it every time it's updated. For things that are new in between those updates, we will always communicate them via the Beyond the Train newsletter. So if you're not signed up for that, please click the link and make sure you're receiving that in your inboxes and that you're reading through it every month as we do provide updates. And we do have another question coming in, so I'll pause for that.
Is OSSE working with other procurement partners such as CPA or HSFC?
We've had a number of conversations with CPA, and we're happy to assist where we can, having them work with SFAs. I'm not familiar with the acronym HSFC.
It's another procurement partner like CPA that does this type of work across the Eastern Seaboard.
Gotcha. I'm not familiar with them, but if it's someone that wants to reach out, we're always happy to talk through with folks. Our customers are you, the school food authority. So you are our major stakeholder that we provide resources to. But if there's someone that you're working closely with, like CPA or EdOps or PCSB, we know that we're a small knit community, and we always want to make sure we do what we can to work with everyone involved.
The training focused on IFBs and RFPs. Will there be a training for informal and micro purchases?
We have a previous slide deck on that, and we can point you directly to that if you'd like. We didn't plan on doing a new refresher anytime soon, but we're happy to field questions on micro and small purchases for sure.
I'll also add to that we have a decent amount of resources on the Google Drive, like a 2-pager with a lot of information about when those are appropriate, and a flow chart that you can use to help guide you through whether or not those are appropriate purchasing methods.
Well, I believe all of our contact information is here. So again, please continue to reach out to your program specialist or anyone on our team for future questions. For those new LEAs, you'll be receiving some welcome emails from us so that you know exactly who to reach out to moving forward. And thanks again to Sarah and Ezra and everyone on the team for pivoting in this current time, making this available virtually, and thanks for our school food authorities for being so flexible in doing this virtually with us. We really appreciate it. We look forward to speaking with you again soon and continuing this work.